We are live. Rosie, kick it away.
Hello. Hi. This is the Quad C LinkedIn Live Talk Show. For those of you who watched last week, welcome back. But to those of you who are here for the very first time, thanks for joining in. This will be a broadcast that discusses all things learning and student success. We will be doing deep dives into frequently asked questions, interviews with our amazing team, and Q&A sessions with clients and industry professionals. My name is Rosie, and I'm a member of the sales team with Quad C. But on these live streams, I will be your host and moderator. With me, I have Jeff, who's also a member of the sales team and actually the person who trained me when I joined the company. In today's live stream, we will be having a conversation about online versus in-person pedagogy with Dr. Rich Shultz. So Jeff has worked with Dr. Rich Shultz several times in the past through his podcast initiatives or through different videos. So Jeff, can you talk to us a little bit about your experience collaborating with Dr. Shultz in the past?
Yeah, of course. My pleasure. Thanks for kicking it away, Rosie. Rich and I have engaged. We met on LinkedIn, right, Rich?
We did, yes.
Yes, we met on LinkedIn. It's all about connecting with like-minded people and student success and education. And we linked up, and I saw that there was a lot of, we had a lot of mutual interests and topics that we want to talk about and tackle in education. And one thing led to another, and then we took our conversation off of LinkedIn and we got on Zoom, and we did some content together. There was a podcast episode, and that's a little bit about my engagements between Rich and I. And I find that he's doing some really cool things, and that's why, Rich, that's why we have you on the show today, because you're doing some really cool things with online teaching and learning, which we are going to discuss.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Yeah.
Wonderful. So for those of you who are watching right now, or when you're watching when this is recorded, feel free to check out Dr. Rich Shultz's LinkedIn page and give him a follow or connect. But you can also hop over to the Quad C page or Jeff and my page, and we'd be happy to connect with you if you have any questions. You can link them in the comments below, or you can ask during the live stream, and we can try to see if we can get to them if it's not too much of a meaty question. And so let me kick this off with kind of a playful question directed to you, Dr. Rich Shultz. Let's say, and this is just for fun, I have a token, and this token is something I'm giving to you that will enable you to travel through time, only backwards. So you're going to be going back in time to any point in your career, and you're going to be able to use this token to have a redo of anything you've done professionally. And you can redo it with what you know now. What is the situation that you're time traveling back to? Say that 3 times fast.
Wow, that's a great question. How do I get that token?
Yeah. See, that's why we have Rosie here, Rich, to come up with these creative ways on how to ask questions and everything. You know what I mean? So
exactly.
Rolling with the punches.
Sure. Well, when I first started teaching online, that was 1997. And I've shared this story with Jeff a little bit before, but I'll quickly share it with everyone else. I was teaching at a community college at a night course, and I had a student who was in a wheelchair, and she came up to me after class one night, and she said, "Dr. Shultz, I need to drop your class." And I thought, gee, that's too bad. I said, "Do you mind if I ask why you're dropping the class?" And she said, "It's too difficult for me to get here physically." She said, "I have to rent a van with a ramp, and I live quite a ways from the college, so it's difficult for me." And I said, "Well, that's not fair. That this is impeding you from getting your education." And so I asked her, "Maybe can we try something?" And she said, "Well, what is it, you know?" And I said, "Well, we'll use some technology and we'll be able to, communicate." And she said, "I'm not a technology." And I said, "Well, we'll make it work. We'll have some phone calls and emails and things." And she said, "On one condition, as long as we do this before the drop date." And I said, "Fair enough, let's do it." So we proceeded to make phone calls, and I put some things online for her so that she could download. And we had lots of emails going back and forth, of course. Back in those days, we didn't have video conferencing, so we couldn't do that. But we lacked tools, and what we lacked in tools, we made up for with communication. And I'm proud to say that she was successful in the course. And I thought, we've served the student here. That's a really good thing for us to do. And I went to my dean and I told him what had happened. And he said, hey, that's great. Maybe we should try a little pilot study on this. And I said, yeah, I'd be willing to do that. So we got together a few students and we tried it. And a couple of years later, fast forward, I was teaching another class and got an email from the same student. And she said, I don't know if you remember me, and of course I did. And she said, I just want to let you know that because of the format, I was able to complete my degree.
Hey.
I kept that email. It makes it all worthwhile. It really does. And so that was my introduction into online learning. In answer to your question about the token, the interesting part about it is when I first started, there weren't any models on how to teach. This was a little too early in the game to have publications and best practices and so forth. So I'm sure that I did everything wrong. And using a token to go back and know what I know now in terms of pedagogy and instructional design, I think I could have served my students much better having done that. So great question. Love the idea of going back in time, but that would be my token use.
All right. That's really interesting. Thank you for sharing that with us.
Yeah, that was and I remember we did the piece of content, and maybe we can link it. We did like a cartoon carousel type of post. So yeah. So now I want to take a little bit of time, Rich, give the audience a little bit about this organization that you founded, abbreviation GOLDEN, which stands for Global Online Learning Development and Extended Network. So talk to us a little bit about what GOLDEN is and why you founded it.
Sure, Jeff. It goes back to sort of the idea of doing everything wrong at the beginning and witnessing, observing through time the evolution of technology, which brought us to the point that we could actually offer online courses in such a way that they were viable for our students. I would say, from my view at least, prior to the advent of the technology development in the 90s, 2000s, it was difficult, as I had a difficult time with that one student, but we made it work. Through time, what I have seen is that even as technology has developed, there has been a bit of a skepticism, a hesitancy, if you will, by some educators to teach online. And I think part of that is as a result of them being afraid that they won't do some of the right things. I know I was when I first started. And those faculty members just have simply not experienced that before. It's not their fault. It's just that they haven't done it. And maybe they haven't used some of the tools. These are expert classroom teachers. And teaching in a different format is a difficult leap for anyone to be able to do something like this. So fast forward a little bit to the pandemic when all of us had to jump to another format. For me, it was Friday the 13th of March, 2020. By the following Monday, we were all to be online and have everything in perfect order for delivering online courses. Of course, that didn't happen. There wasn't any pre-planning. There wasn't any instructional design. The way of teaching, pedagogy, if you will, was greatly unknown because it is very different between the formats.
Yeah.
So the first thing I wanted to do was help out the faculty members that I was working with. And I tried to get a cadre of people who had experiences in different areas, areas of expertise such as instructional design and online pedagogy, embedding DEI concepts into their online teaching and so forth. So I went on LinkedIn and started recruiting people, and educators, being the community that we are, just came out of the woodwork. And they were saying, oh, sure, I can help. Sure, I can serve, to help people out a little bit. And I just put up a sign-up sheet, simple sign-up sheet for people to sign up. And as this developed through time, We launched this in July, almost coming up on a year now, of 2021. We have over 550 members now that are part of Golden from 51 countries. So,
wow, that's outstanding.
yeah, we're still getting some traction, and we're still getting new people that are coming in all the time. But it's a great way to communicate with others who have some of the same sorts of, yeah, you can see the Golden website there, goldenonline.org. It is essentially a community of practice. So we have educators everywhere in various aspects in their career. We have folks who are professionals that are outside of academia, that are working in the professional business sector. We want their input as well because they're instructing and providing professional development online to folks that they work with. So this is a really great way just to kind of come in, get a little bit of what you need, contact others, have conversations, share resources with each other. We have a couple of new sponsors now who are providing us with instances of learning management systems. So we are in the process of building some professional development online learning experiences for those who would like it. It's completely free. Everything in terms of the membership and the involvement is all free at this point. And we just like to see people come together who have an interest in online learning, want to become better at it, and want to work with experts who have done this before. So this is a lot of fun for me personally because I get to meet people all over the world with like interests, like Jeff and yourself, Rosie, and the list goes on of all these great people. It's like an all-star team of people that have signed up for this, and it's really a great place to come for people to share resources.
That's outstanding. I imagine you are asked the following question all of the time, but what would you say to someone who doesn't quite understand the difference between online versus in-person instruction and teaching, the pedagogy behind it?
Yeah, and that's exactly what happened at the start of the pandemic. Like I said,
Yeah.
many educators the world over had never done this before. It was brand new. They had to shift on a dime and
Yeah.
pivot to this online learning, and it wasn't familiar, which really does make it kind of scary. It's uncomfortable. It's new. Um, I think that the best way to approach this is to look at it as though you are teaching in a classroom, but the key is communication and the pedagogy behind it. You have to have an online presence when you teach online. It's not just sitting behind a computer screen and reading papers, looking at PowerPoints, listening to videos to learn. There is an instructor that is behind this that is there as a guide, as a facilitator, as support, someone who serves as a coach to help those learners to be able to get what it is that they need in terms of learning or improving their skill sets, whatever it happens to be. But the pedagogy behind this is so different. You can't just take your PowerPoints from your lectures in the classroom, put them online, and expect your students to learn from those. Likewise, you can't just turn on Zoom and start lecturing for an hour. Students are going to turn that out. They're going to tune out to the point of muting and turning off the video. I happen to have a name for that. I call that lullaby learning.
Ah.
You might as well issue them a pillow and sing them a lullaby because that's what's probably going to happen. So, yeah, it's all about this idea of being in touch with your students and creating a safe learning environment for them. The learning communities are absolutely essential to get students to work collaboratively and to get them in touch with the content. We always say that there are 3 touch points in teaching and learning online. There is the instructor with the student, there is the student with other students, and there is the student or the learner with the content itself. So if you're hitting all of those, you're providing an ample opportunity for those students to have the right types of communication to deliver what it is that they need. But being open being online, being there for the students so they know that they're not going to be isolated out there in cyberland. They're going to have a resource, a reference. And that's, I think, the biggest difference that we see. It's easy in a classroom for a student to walk up to the instructor afterwards and say, hey, I have a question. How do you do that online? Do you email? Do you send them a discussion board, which might not be answered right away? Do you call them? Do you have a Zoom session with them? That's something that the instructor or the facilitator needs to lay out some of the ground rules in the course before they begin.
Yeah, I think first you made some good points there, and an idea for another post. Lullaby, what was it? Lullaby lectures.
Lullaby learning.
Lullaby. That's good.
That would be a pretty good panel discussion.
Yes. How not to put your students asleep by Dr. Rich Shultz. Studies have been approved by. So going on that human, we spoke before about the importance of a human element, and you were starting to touch on that with, I love how you broke down those kind of 3 pillars, right? You have the student and the teacher, the student to student peer, and then you have the student with the content. But where does that, like, can you give some examples of, you said the human element, and you mentioned a good point before about some online classes, it's mostly asynchronous. You have, you go to Udemy or whatever other website and a bunch of online courses and good content. Don't get me wrong, but a lot of it is online and it's like one way. And you mentioned a really good point about the human factor. So where can you give some examples of the human factor and where that comes into play with supporting students and faculty in online teaching?
Sure. Most online courses have discussion forums, whether those be greatly asynchronous, where students will post something and later on other students or the facilitator will come back and post. That's one way of showing for the facilitator that they are there and they are providing feedback and beginning that feedback loop with the student. But that's only one way. Another thing that I like to do is at least once a week, just make a video for the students and see how they're doing. How's everybody working on this week's assignments during this module? Here's what we did last week. Here's a recap of that, some of the great things we did, some of the challenges we have. Here's what we're going to do next week. So keep this in mind in your learning. This is what's going to happen. Here are the key points. Here's your takeaway. Now they have that video, they can refer to that back and replay that and so forth. You can't do that in a classroom. You can't ask a professor to say, can you rewind and start that all over again? So that's another way of doing it. Setting up office hours, virtual office hours is also a good way where you can have that discussion with the student, even if it's 5 minutes, just touching base with them. Another way that I like to do, and this isn't always possible for every student, but it's offered, is at the beginning of the week, have an open session, maybe just 10 minutes, where the facilitator can check in with the students, see how they're doing, how's your health, all those sorts of things. How are you feeling about the course? Is your comfort zone high? Those types of things. And do you have any brief questions that we can answer? If they're long and involved questions, we can approach this in another way. But if it's short questions, what do we have to do this week? What is turned in? Then you can approach those and everyone's there. And again, we record that so that students who are unable to make that, we post that in the learning management system and then they can go back and refer to it. So they should have a variety of different methodologies, different ways of being able to be in contact with the facilitator in the course.
Awesome. We got some people commenting. Cameron Sabor. Hey, Rosie, you know Cameron. Do you know Cameron?
I'm acquainted with him. Absolutely.
Thanks. Cameron said something. He said, very interesting discussion. Cameron, if you want to point out some things that are interesting, we can respond here. So keep your comments coming.
So you've seen the before times when it was just in-person learning. You saw the awkward transition into hybrid learning, and then you saw when it was almost exclusively online learning. With all of this in mind, what are some of the advantages in your eyes of online teaching and learning?
Well, I think I alluded to one at the very beginning is accessibility,
Yes.
particularly for those students who are unable to physically make it into the classroom. You have students who have physical challenges. You have students who perhaps are in the military and are stationed somewhere where they're unable to physically get to the classroom. You have those who are just working every day. They are professionals. They can't set foot 9 to 9:50 on a Monday, Wednesday, Friday in a classroom. So we need to be able to serve all of these students and make for an accessible curriculum. So that's the first thing. Secondly, I alluded to this as well. If you're in a physical classroom, and primarily that's delivered in lectures, you can't ask the educator who's standing up on the stage, if you will, to rewind and say that again. They have to move on. They have to continue to address all of their content for that particular day. So it's different when you're doing it online because you can rewind. You can take time to think and to reflect and to think very deeply about how you're going to respond to a particular discussion board question. Students that sit in the back of the classroom and sort of with their head down and don't want to be called upon, ironically, those are some of the students who in an online course, when they have the opportunity to chime in and write something, they feel this is their cue. And they're able to, behind the anonymity of the computer screen, really express themselves. What are we asking our students to do? But we're asking our students to think deeply and to provide some critical thinking in how they learn. That is exactly what we're doing here. We're allowing those students time to reflect, to think, to have that critical thinking process going on before they actually post something, knowing that it's going to be out there permanently. In a classroom, having a discussion, we put our students sometimes as instructors in the spotlight. And many times we get the deer in the headlights look, or we get a one word answer, because when you think about it, it's not really all that fair to those students to put them into that position. Many of them are not going to be able to respond. It is a life skill to develop over time to be able to provide feedback and to provide responses to something like that. And some of the students are just not quite there yet. So that one or two word answer in the classroom evolves into a very long discussion, deeply involved online, because they're not under the spotlight. They have an opportunity to take their time with what it is that they want to respond to. So there's a whole host of different things that are different that you can do in the online classroom versus the physical classroom. And I just touched on a couple. There are many more that you can do.
Yeah.
Really, depending on the tools that you use.
I'm even thinking of like, and tool, that's a perfect segue, but even like thinking out loud here, if you have like a recording of the entire lecture, no lullaby lectures though, maybe they can. I spoke with someone else that's also teaching online, strictly online, and she makes clips.
Yes.
So instead of telling students, oh, watch this an hour and a half long video, here's 45 seconds covering this, or here's 2 minutes and 15 seconds covering this concept. And there's certainly some technologies that have evolved since 1997. So what are some apart from Zoom, of course, we named that one, but what are some other technologies that you use and maybe some of your peers use, maybe you use with Golden? What are some other technologies that you're using, that your peers are using, that you're finding that are effective for teaching and learning online?
Well, there are a number of tools that we can use. Years ago, it used to be, gee, I wish I had a tool to be able to do this. And we would look around and we would search for these, and perhaps someone had already put this out, but chances were not very good. Today, It's the opposite. We are overwhelmed with the amount of tools that are out there. It's just a matter of choosing the one that you feel most comfortable with. I have 3 rules, if you will, or requirements for using tools. The
Yes.
first of which is it has to serve a purpose. So it can't just be a tool for the sake of using technology. Secondly, it has to be a tool that does not have a steep learning curve. For example, if it takes weeks for a professor to be able to learn how to use this tool to teach,
Mm-hmm.
it's undoubtedly going to take a great deal of time for the students to learn it as well. And we don't want the focus of learning to be on the tool. We want it to be on the content and the critical thinking aspects and the skill sets.
Right.
The third requirement is if you're an educator, you don't have a huge budget. So you want things to be either very inexpensive or free is better. So those are my 3 requirements. Those tools are out there to do almost everything that you want to do. Now, there are tools that are still coming out, obviously, every day, and they're improving upon some of them that we already have out there. Artificial intelligence is going to be worked into lots of tools in the future. There's one particular tool that is used exclusively for discussion boards that uses AI to interpret the student's response on a discussion board and provides them in real time with some feedback. So that's less work for the faculty member providing that. And there are rubrics and so forth that go along with that.
Interesting.
That the student knows that when you're in a discussion board, you want to respond with more than I agree, right? Because you want some depth to that. And this really helps to show them what a great response looks like and how to ask the right questions, right? Because asking the right questions is a life skill. We have to know what to ask and to provide that information and get the feedback loop going back and forth.
Yeah.
So that's another tool.
What was the? Oh no, go ahead. Sorry. Go ahead. Continue.
No, I was just going to say that another tool that I've used in the past is one that where a professor can go on or an educator and either provide a PDF to read or a video, some sort of instructions. And then the student can chime in a number of different ways. They can phone in, they can provide a video, they can text, so they can just write in a traditional chat box type environment. So they choose how they want to respond, and it records it in order. So it creates a conversation. The professor starts, and there's a response from a student, and there's another one, and so forth. And you can literally hit play, and it plays back the whole conversation. So you're knowing then if students are listening to the entire conversation or whether they're just listening to a few things because you start to hear repeats of things.
Yeah.
But if you listen to the whole conversation, that's your peer-to-peer communication and involvement. And they're learning from what their classmates are saying. Yeah.
Rosie's going to ask one more question, but before we get onto that point, what was there was a really cool like online environment, avatars. What was and I think you use it with Golden, right?
We have, the Metaverse is a burgeoning tool for us to use. I think at this point, it's very new and the jury is still out how exactly we're going to leverage the Metaverse for teaching and learning. But I see tremendous responsibilities for faculty members to at least look into this.
Yeah.
And there are great opportunities here to be creative, to innovate in how to provide a real immersive experience for their learners. So I think there's a way of doing that, and educators are already doing this, that can really provide those students with a way of experiencing things, as opposed to just reading about them or hearing in a video. Students, many of the younger traditional age students, they're already doing this, and they have done this. Oddly enough, playing games or the serious games and the gamification aspect greatly has advantages for students to engage them. We have seen, we've observed many students who have been gamers who have gone into a gamified course and done very well with that because they understand how to navigate and how it works. So that's another thing that I think is going to be adopted by more and more educators is this idea of how to engage my students through some things that are fun, because learning is fun, or it should be.
Yeah. So, Dr. Rich, Rich, if we have teachers who are learning practitioners watching this broadcast, what would one or two actionable pieces of advice be that you would encourage them to consider as they move forward in their online learning career?
Number one, if you're new to online learning, if it is something that you haven't had a lot of practice doing, do two things. Number one, take an online course, whether it's Udemy or Coursera or wherever it is. Have the experience of taking it, because that provides the perspective of you as the learner so that you can translate that to what your learners are going to experience when you teach an online course. Secondly is do some professional development. Learn as much as you possibly can about things like instructional design and online pedagogy, and learning about how to embed the all-important accessibility aspects into your courses, how to address DEI concepts were absolutely critical to building those fundamentally safe learning communities and experiences. We want our students to feel welcome. We want them to be able to come in and put all of their concerns aside so that when they come into an online learning environment, they're going to feel comfortable, they're going to feel safe, and they're going to interact with everyone in there without any fear of reprisal at all. So I think those are two things right off the top of my head. I would say take a course and get some professional development.
Rich, you forgot one.
I did.
Last and not least is sign up at Golden.
Absolutely.
Sign up. Sorry, let me get this right. goldenonline.org, right? That's where they got to sign up to get the support, the peer-to-peer support from other teachers, from other instructors to best learn online and teaching.
Interaction with others who have done this. I can't tell you how much I have learned from others around the world, learning their perspectives, how things are done in their culture, from where they sit, how they approach pedagogy, which is very different in different places, based on different cultures and so forth. So this is an intriguing field to get into. It's useful, and from my view, I believe that online learning is not only here to stay, but it's going to develop, diversify, become more innovative, and it's going to be much more of a central part of learning in the future.
Well, that is a very optimistic note for us to cap off this broadcast. Thank you so much for joining us today. This has been Dr. Rich Shultz. I've been Rosie Breen, and this is Jeff Georgie. You can find more resources at quadc.io, and you can find us all on LinkedIn. See you all Thursday, and thanks again for watching. Bye.
Thank you. Thank you, Rich.
Always a pleasure.